like if I were to define boundaries more generally speaking, boundaries are meant to keep self within, not to keep somebody else out.
Beautiful.
And so if we think about like, what does that mean to a baby? The concept of the boundary then is a meaningless concept because we are with our babies as a necessary condition that nature bestowed upon us. They're meant to be deeply, deeply dependent on us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suppose in a way, if you think about the idea that we're a social species and we live hopefully harmoniously amongst each other with this concept of that there's social norms.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Spoil Your Baby podcast. I am so excited to be here today with Dr. Vanessa Lapointe. She's a former psychologist and now a parenting educator and a mother. And her and I were lucky enough to spend time together about a year ago in Romania on a wonderful trip. And we're reunited today. So thank you so much for being here.
Feels so good.
It does. It really does. And today we're gonna talk about something that I think may be a unique conversation for a lot of parents. It's a place where there's like a lot of confusion, a lot of questions. We're gonna talk about what discipline means for babies, 0 to 3. And touch on why kind of the traditional idea of discipline doesn't really fit with how babies' brains grow and how babies develop. So why don't we start with you? What brought you to this work and in the world of discipline? So important. Yeah.
I was practicing as a psychologist and also had young children. And I had been trained in what I will define as a very kind of behaviorist approach. You don't like what you're seeing, you squash it. And the method that will be deemed successful is whatever one ends up causing the behavior to stop, right? So there wasn't a lot of consideration for what is happening behind the behavior, what's happening in the internal world. And then I started to notice that the referrals coming into our clinic across all the clinicians, a lot of those referrals are anxiety-based and a child presenting with kind of challenging behaviors. And when we would go through those intakes and look at sort of what was happening for families, it seemed like the discipline was actually causing the anxiety. Yeah. And so I started to do a deep dive and I, studied a bit with Gordon Neufeld and like a bunch of different things to try and figure out like, what's the mismatch here? There's obviously something happening. And eventually what I came up with is that there is sort of a downstream fallout from how we discipline our children. And that fallout actually creates, more disruption for them in life as the years tick on than if we were to be able to approach things in a compassionate kind of way. And, it's all part of a really interesting school of thought in terms of who children are and how they communicate and how it is that we are meant to interact with that so that they get to go and grow in the way that nature intended, not necessarily in the way that we think is the path.
Yeah, it reminds me so much of the kind of the same misinformation that tries to guide parents to not spoil their babies, right? Yeah. They're like, don't hold them too much, that will spoil your baby. But actually, if you don't hold them, they're not nourished. And then they end up with the effects that you think you're avoiding.
Yeah.
And it sounds so similar with the discipline, right? Where it's like people are kind of brought up in a world where it's like, if you do sort of harsh discipline and punishments, you're sort of promised that everything will turn out, but actually then you're starting to see some of the anxiety and some of the behavior that you're trying to avoid.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it's all part of the same thing.
Yes.
Like the same logic that would fuel this idea that, babies need to self-soothe and, all of that kind of nonsense. The same
Mhm.
logic that fuels that is the same logic applied to why we should punish children and why we should, make sure that they've really understood who's in charge and, all of that kind of gross stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Power.
all the same school of thought.
Completely, yeah. Mostly that behaviorist thought. I always tell parents, like, with 0 to 3, so much of the quote, air quotes, bad behavior are a stress response in the
Mhm.
baby, right? So like, what are the bad behaviors like that need to be disciplined or punished? They're like crying, hitting, running away, not listening, not sitting
Biting.
still, biting, scratching, all that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, tell us more about that.
Well, I think about like, what does it mean to be, let's pick two as just a random age.
Mhm.
And as a 2-year-old, by definition, you're very much in process of developing and becoming. And so by definition, then your brain is immature. You don't have impulse control. You don't have the wiring necessary for self regulation. That's still another 25 years or so in the making.
Yeah.
And it, it, to go to the example of biting, when you're 2 years old, you're still orally focused. Like that's an interesting portal for you to explore your
Mhm.
world. And
Mhm.
it would make good sense to me, anyways, if you're 2 and you're orally focused and you don't have the internal wiring for self regulation and you're in a moment of overwhelm or a moment of excitement, that you would like grab the thing closest and just like think you're like, oh, it feels so good, right?
Mhm.
And then imagine that that's what you need. Like as a little 2-year-old, we're not going to
Yeah.
say that we just allow it to happen, but as a 2-year-old, imagine that that's what your little nervous system is like. Oh, we just need to get hold of this right now. And so
Yeah.
does this beautiful thing for you, which is gives you an outlet to get
Yeah.
a hold of this thing
Release.
right now.
Yeah.
And then you're made wrong for it. Can you imagine the, like,
Yeah.
disorientation that would happen for a
And
child?
shame probably, right?
It would be like, I've always had hazel eyes. So imagine that I'm born into the world, this is who I am, and I get made wrong. Like, change that eye color. That's not okay.
Yeah.
That's largely what we do to kids when we make developmentally appropriate behaviors or any behavior for that matter, we make them wrong for being who it is that
Mhm.
they are. And
Yeah.
then all bets are off. Like that's when things start to get challenging.
Completely. And babies are really asking us to fully accept them through
Hmm.
who they are. So that's a huge disconnect for them. And then we have our parents who are pressured to have well-behaved
Yeah.
babies.
Yeah.
Um, and like, that puts them in a place where they're like, what's the answer? What do
Yeah.
I do?
And the problem is the answer is not what everybody thinks it should be. Like the answer isn't to stop the behavior. The answer is to support the child.
Yeah.
And we do that by retreating to the environment around the child. And so if you think about like the ABCs of behavior, the behaviorist approach is going to focus on the C's. So the A is the antecedent, the thing that comes before the behavior. The B is the behavior. The C
Mhm.
being the consequence or the thing that comes after the behavior. Behaviorists are focused on the C. A behavior occurs. I'm going to create some kind of, backlash pressure so that
Yeah.
it doesn't occur again by applying what we dress up and call a consequence, but really it's a punishment if we're going to
Mhm.
be just clear about the terminology.
Yeah.
Whereas if you want to really nurture development, then the developmentalists, of which I would say I'm in that club, you focus on the antecedent. It's what
Yeah.
came before. And
Yeah.
so what came before is what's happening in the environment around the child. What came before is it's been a really overstimulating day. What came before is, you've had 6 fights this week with your partner, and your child, though maybe not understanding the nature of that, is bathed in the energy of that. Like, those are all
Mhm.
the kinds of things that come before.
Yeah.
And we want to just take stock of how is the world around the child and the environment around the child, how is that meshing with who it is that they are and how it is that
Mm.
they're showing up in the world, and is that a fit for them or not? And if it's not, then to understand that our role as the grown-ups is to make it work for the child, to not make the child work for us and for the world around them.
Absolutely. And, with the behaviorist approach, we're also assuming that the child will have the brain ability
Mhm.
to change a reactive moment, right?
Yeah.
And us as adults, we barely have the ability to change our reactions when we're
Mhm.
completely dysregulated. And so we think that a child's going to get dysregulated, be in a reactive moment, and be like, oh, I had to have a timeout last time.
Right?
So I better change
Like, if you wanna make
what I'm
yourself
doing right.
crazy, do that.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. So let's give people an example, right? So
Mhm.
let's say it is the my child gets upset and bites
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
or hits or kicks or goes on the ground and does a tantrum. The classic response would be to punish them, right? To have some kind of consequence to try to stop that behavior coming up in the future. We know that doesn't really make sense or work. What what should parents be looking at? I know there's so much for them to learn, but
Yeah,
step
so
one,
the idea is that all behavior is just communication. There's no such thing as misbehavior. And so our job, particularly for a young child, will want to be considering developmentally where it is that they are at and allow ourselves to meet them exactly there. You want to put the bar where they can jump and have success with that, not where they're going to be tripping over it constantly and feeling, at the effect of that. And
yeah,
so if you have a 2-year-old that's biting, the appropriate response is to provide more supervision so that you can be available to whatever the need is as it arises in the moment. And
yeah,
of course, in a firm and kind, emphasis on kind way,
hmm,
you can be communicating what the boundary is or what the expectation is, but do so in a way that you are not deluded into believing that just because you've communicated that it's never going to happen again. Of course,
yeah.
it's going to happen
You're going to have to
again
probably say it 100 or 1,000 times, like more
at,
than
at minimum.
yeah, yeah,
And the road to hell for our littles is not paved with good intentions. There, our children can have beautiful intentions, and just by virtue of the fact that they're still figuring it out and they're still going and growing and they're perfection and all of that. But by virtue of the fact that it's all still in flux, they're just not going to be able to hang on to their good intentions. And we can believe in the innocence of who they are, just as we should do for each other,
hmm,
and come alongside that rather than have to react and squash.
yeah. So really, they're having these big moments of stress, these big feelings, this overwhelm,
Mhm,
and they
mhm.
need our support in those
Yeah,
moments and
yeah,
some guidance, possibly, like
yeah,
once they've calmed
sure.
down, but without those expectations that the next time will
Right,
be different. It's like they're learning over years, really,
exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can lean into that as a powerful force, like it's real. Child development is real. I promise you, they
Mhm.
develop. And our
Yeah.
job is to make that path as unencumbered as possible.
Yes. I have 2 questions competing in my head. I'll ask the first one first. You mentioned boundaries, right? And having some, gentle, kind boundaries. Um, what are some I see some, like, misunderstandings about boundaries and babies a lot. Will you speak to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting word
Yeah.
given the connotation that it takes on. And when we think about babies and who babies are, they are us, like they're an extension of who it is that we are. And so this discussion of boundaries, like if I were to define boundaries more generally speaking, boundaries are meant to keep self within, not to keep somebody else out. And
Beautiful.
so if we think about like, what does that mean to a baby? The concept of the boundary then is a meaningless concept because
Yeah.
we are with our babies as a necessary condition that nature bestowed upon us. They're meant to be deeply, deeply dependent on us. And
Mm-hmm.
so I suppose in a way, if you think about the idea that we're a social species and we live um, hopefully harmoniously amongst each other with this concept of that there's social norms, we don't walk down the street and bite random people or hit random people or whatever. We have social
Mm-hmm.
norms about these sorts of things. We can be providing a gentle reminder. What I often think of, like, we just put little guardrails on the bridges that our children are walking across so that our children can feel safe.
Yeah.
They can feel like they're not going to fall off the bridge. And the guardrails are those little boundaries and how we're showing up and how we have, routines in place. And by routines, I mean like ways that we greet one another and ways that we say goodnight to each other or goodbye to each other, or ways that we come to the table together, ways, like ways that we be.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is like what I would talk about as being the way that we be boundaried with our youngsters. So it's not this sort of more commonly held concept of a boundary, like I don't want that right now, so you're going to have to wait, or da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
It's how do I hold myself within so that I can be fullest and most available to those who are counting on me. It's not about being against other or keeping other out. And for our babies, I think we have to be careful about that definition and how we construct it.
Yeah, that's such an important analysis for parents to know, because I think there are so many messages out there
Mm.
about having boundaries, even with young babies. And the ways that I see it in the world are just acting to stress babies out even more
Yeah.
and get more of that, behavior that parents are uncomfortable with or think is
Yeah.
bad, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, completely. So this is wonderful. This is a really supportive approach to
Mm.
our babies, helping them learn slowly and gently. And also knowing that they also want to be pro-social in the end,
Mhm.
right? Like when we
Mhm.
are offering those suggestions, like, oh, we'll use like gentle hands with our friends. When we're mad, we can stomp our feet instead, or, those little suggestions we can help them with that take a lot of time. Also having that faith in them that they,
Mhm.
do want to cooperate with a lot of the boundaries that you talked about. They want to be part of the
Yeah.
table at dinner. They want to have manners and, be kind to our friends and all these kinds of things. And I don't know if people see babies like that always.
Yeah. There's a real, like, the historical lens on that is that like kids have been this nuisance and they're this thing that needs to be tamed and kind of controlled. And when we can flip it, if we can just really get that, we revert to an understanding that they're inherently good,
Yes. And they can have a
inherently.
hard time, just like all of us,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
When a baby just like flips out and starts having a tantrum or screams or, throws something off a table, I still see that reaction in the world where it's like, oh,
Yeah.
bad behavior, right? And the
Yeah.
attention's on the parent, like, what are they going to do?
Right.
And we're still really not there yet with understanding
At
our
all.
little ones. Yeah.
Really not there at all.
Yeah.
And there's still it's so stunning to me. I don't know if you have this experience, but I feel like I'm I'm stuck in this little bubble. Aside from the interesting commentary that maybe flows on some of my social media posts, I mostly talk to people like you, and I talk to parents who come to me because they've maybe heard some things in the way that I talk about children, and they want some support. So I'm in this bubble of people who see things the way that I see things.
Yeah.
And so I'm often like, it's stunning to me out in the world that there are still, I did a new intake just earlier this week with a family who were really being encouraged by their pediatrician for their 6-month-old baby to use Cry It Out. And
Mhm.
I still can't understand how in 2025 we're still talking about that. We're still talking
Yeah.
about timeouts. We're still talking about, punishing children. I was in a school the other day and happened to be sort of working off of a classroom where I think the teacher probably either didn't know I was in there or didn't realize that I was in there,
Mm.
and I heard the irritation that laced the voice as the directives were delivered to the
Mhm.
students, and I just thought, oh, like where did we go wrong? That this is how we think about children, and this
Yeah.
is the way we're conceptualizing our role in their upbringing. And if we
Yeah.
could, really get back to the core of who they are, of who we all are, which is that we are innocence and innocent and light and all things lovely. And we can really lean into the goodness of that and then trust that nature will do with that exactly what is meant to be done.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. It's it's amazing. It is still amazing. And I have families as well who sort of are like, okay, great. Like, I'll do it that way for 0 to 3. But like then like I'm gonna
I'll
start
bet they're off.
when do I get to start really punishing and
Yeah.
really going with this discipline? So
Yeah.
will you speak to that a little bit as
Yeah.
well for
Yeah.
listeners? Yeah.
The short answer is never.
Yes, thank you.
Because what we're really looking at is we're looking to meet our children exactly where they are developmentally. And even when you onboard just like a little bit of information about what children are and aren't capable of based on where their brain development is, you'll realize that a lot of the expectations and standards that we have set for children have nothing to do with healthy child development and everything to do with this sort of fear-based culture that we all live
Yeah,
in, and we all need to show up and behave a certain way. And if you have the child who's not sleeping, or the child who's biting, or the child who hits, or the child who's acting out, or whatever it is, then you obviously haven't been a good enough parent. You haven't disciplined
yes,
enough. You haven't, all of those things. And I don't think that that's true at all. I think that, most of the time, the kids that I'm really worried about are the ones who are super well behaved and sit crisscross applesauce and
mhm,
those are the ones that I'm like, oh, like, here's my card because we're going to need to talk about
yeah,
12 years from now.
yeah,
This is not going to go well. There's going to be, so much that had to be squashed down to appease and please the grown-ups around. And in all of that, it's definitely not that I say, oh, just release your children to the flowery meadows and hope for them to bloom. That's
mhm,
not it at all. And it is that we really need to get down with the idea that this is something to be approached with compassion and humanity and heart and all of those kinds of things, so that our children can come through a childhood that they don't have to recover from.
yeah,
And I would go so far as to say that, the mental health crisis that everybody's talking about, a lot of the conflict that happens around the world, like all of this, it could be avoided if we were to listen to our children and show up compassionately. And yes, be firm and put guardrails on the bridge and all of the rest of it,
yeah,
but deliver on all of that with heart.
I completely agree.
Mm.
I had a thought when you were talking about, like, the really well-behaved. child who's not reactive, not having stress, expressing their stress and their emotions, it really does, you know, kind of bring it home for parents and society, because we're just not comfortable. Like, I feel like so
Yeah.
much of this discipline is
Yeah.
like, can we just get people to shove all their feelings in and not express anything? Because we are just not comfortable with emotion. And
Yeah.
so that's why when we see babies, like I remember this one time, I remember exactly so clear. I was in a grocery store in Nova Scotia. We were visiting with my son, and he wanted obviously like all the candy and toys in the store. And it wasn't happening. And he was going nuts, like completely melting down. And I was like, I got you. I'm here. Like, we're not getting those things. But like, I see it's upsetting. I totally
Mm.
understand.
Mhm.
And there was like so many grannies coming up, like trying, just like, I don't think you know what you're doing. And like, what's happening here? Or they were like flashing toys, like, oh no, look at this, like trying
Yeah.
to like distract him from his feelings or stop them or
Right.
help me, figure it out. And I was like, no, no, no. Like, this is how it looks. Like,
Yeah.
this is how it looks. Right. So that takes a lot of courage
It really does.
to do that in the
Yeah.
world, because it's almost like, yeah, it feels almost like a bizarre horror movie where it's like, if anyone, especially our littles, are like crying or emoting, that everyone just comes and is like, stop it, stop it. How do we stop it?
Right.
Instead of just letting it happen.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're
So we have
we're
to
meant to
encourage that.
feel, you know? Like, you have to feel, and the full range of emotion. If you wanna be fully human, then you have to feel the full range of it. Um, and it's a wonderful thing, that's such a great example. I feel like every parent has had that moment. And
Yeah.
how do you really lean into being available to meeting the needs of that child that's in front of you, not feeling like you have to cave to
Yeah.
the people all around you, because you're not here in the service of those people. When it comes to your child, you're here in the service of that child. And
Yeah.
all those folks, well intentioned, if not a little misdirected,
Mhm.
they're grown-ups, and they get to sort themselves out. They can cope with their distress and their discomfort because they're grown-ups and they have a
Yeah.
grown-up brain. And so we can trust them to be capable or not of that, but it has zero reflection on who it is that we are.
Completely. We feel so much pressure as
Mhm.
parents, right? Especially in public.
Yeah,
Um, to do that kind of, yeah, like control, or like,
completely.
I'm a good mother. I can stop my
Yeah.
child from tantruming or
Well, and where did we onboard the program that
yeah.
we need to acquiesce, we need to be, we need to play into the status quo of what everybody around us expects? Where did we onboard that kind of thinking? We
Mhm.
onboarded that kind of thinking because when we were little children, we were, reprimanded if we didn't buy into the party line. If we didn't do what everybody expected us to do, we got in trouble for that.
Yeah.
And so we all learned very early, oh, you've got to actually be subservient to the status quo. And so it's we are invited, many of us, by being brought to our knees in this experience of trying to navigate being parents. We're invited to grow ourselves just as much as we're really wanting to support our children in their growth.
Yeah, we have to be regulated in those moments and in charge and all of the things that you mentioned. And I was going to ask you that as kind of our last question in the discussion, was like, I think so many aspects of parenting a baby are growing us up at the same
Mhm.
time, right? Like, our brains as mothers and fathers become plastic again. Our emotional brain areas can be remolded through all these experiences we have. So we speak a little bit more about how, when we are disciplining, in a brain healthy way, that's helping our baby develop, but also us in the process.
I love this question. I think all the time about how we are all the ages that we have ever been. So though I'm 50 years old, there's a 1-year-old inside of me and a 5-year-old inside of me and a 12-year-old inside of me. And what I have often witnessed in the parents that I get to support is that the things that are most challenging for them with their children um, are the things that need to be most healed within them in terms of their
Mhm.
inner child. And
Yeah.
so, as an example, and if we look into the sort of impact on what our programs are and how we develop these, stories that we bring into adulthood, and we allow those stories to shape our world, including how we parent our children. When we think about where those come from, like those stories have come from our own childhood. They could be even preconception in terms of were we invited in or not, all of that. So you really start to peel the layers of the onion back. And if you have a child who's maybe not sleeping as much, or if you have a child who's the big actor outer and lots of hits and kicks and bites or whatever it is, whatever that's pulling up inside of you is probably a relic that pulls you back to your own experiences in that when you were a child. And so, as a child, if you had behaved the way that your actual child is now behaving, what would have happened? Would you have been hit? Would you have been punished in some other way? And the answer for most people, because most of us were raised by behaviorists, will be yeah. And so, of course, now you watch, your 3-year-old hit your little 6-month-old younger sibling. And of course, there's a in you, because if you had done that at 3, like there would have been hell to pay for it. So now your little inner 3-year-old is really panicked, like that needs to stop. It's not safe. Don't do that. Heads are going to roll.
Mhm.
And so you get an opportunity in the parenting of the outer child to retemplate the experience and reparent that inner child. And it's that the dance of that interplay that I think is probably the most potent force as far as what allows us to accept the gift that our children bring us, which is the opportunity to get a do-over.
Beautiful. So beautiful. We can talk
Mm,
to ourselves a little bit in those moments too and
absolutely.
empathize and be compassionate for the little one.
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here. Will you share a little bit of where people can learn more? Because I know you have lots of books and
Mhm.
offerings.
Yeah.
Yeah, let us know.
So Dr. Vanessa Lapointe, Dr. Vanessa Lapointe with an E on the end.com is my website. I have 2 books out so far: Discipline Without Damage, How to Get Your Kids to Behave Without Messing Them Up, and then also a book called Parenting Right from the Start, which is primarily for parents of young children. I have a program where I work with parents directly. We've just closed intake for the next 6 months, but we'll have another cohort coming through probably sometime in the spring of 2026 called The Parent Transformation Journey. And there's more info about that on my website. I do have a membership community where we do Q&As and these kinds of things every month.
Wonderful.
And otherwise, I hang out on social. I have a live that I do with my husband every Thursday evening. So last night we were talking about resilience and what that really means.
Great.
Yeah, lots of activity on social. So you can come hang out on Instagram or Facebook and feel your heart filled up rather than emptied out by the world of social media.
Yes, curate that to your
Right.
advantage. That's good advice. Oh, wonderful. Well, we'll post all of the links on the
Awesome.
episode as well. And it was so good to be with you. And thank you so much for all of your
Aw.
insight and wisdom.
It was lovely. You made it very easy, and I was delighted to get to hang
Oh,
with you. Thank you for having
amazing.
me.
Thanks, Dr. V.